This is a video about conducting a churn analysis in Motif. We're working with the Motiflix dataset, which includes the kind of events you'd see with a video streaming service. And we're picking up at a place we were at in the behavioral segmentation video, where we defined a segment of users based on their behavior. In this case, we looked at sessions, we looked at the number of movies that a user watches in each session, we calculated that, and then we averaged it across each user's total set of sessions. And then we found this cutoff of 1.5, and greater than that we called you a binge user, less than that you were a casual user. So great, we've got this segment, and now we want to do some analysis using it. So today we're looking at churn, and we're going to use churn in terms of usage and not in terms of payment. So we're going to look at where a user sort of lapses in their returning and coming back to our product. And so the first thing I want to do is actually start to include that time value, calculate that time gap to each event and eventually each session. So the first thing I'm going to do is ask our Soul Copilot to add a dimension to each event with the time gap to the following event. All right, let's see what that returns. Great. So this is going to be some array math, so it may get a little complicated, but I'm going to walk you through it. So sequence refers to the entire sequence. This is a reserved word. :(-1), this is called a slice operator. It's in the Python style. And :(-1) means look at the whole array except for the last item in the array. So that's what the -1 sort of says. Don't include that last item. And we're going to, for every event in that array, create a value called time to next event. And then we're going to calculate that by subtracting two timestamps. In this case, again, it's array math. We're taking an array of timestamps and we're subtracting another array of timestamps from it. The first array is all sequences, 1:, that means starting with the second event in the sequence. So that's event number 2 all the way through the last one. And then we're subtracting, again, everything except the last event. So that's, starting at the beginning through everything but the last one. So you can see how we've kind of taken, events 2 through the last one and subtracting events 1 through, all events minus the last one. And that makes sense. So now when we subtract those two arrays, we get an array back, which is the delta or distance between all the events. Now if I click over on an event, I can see this new value, time to next event, 4.39 seconds. Well, the time between events doesn't matter quite as much as the time between sessions or something bigger. So I'm going to sessionize our data, and I'm going to use Copilot again for that because it's very easy. And if you go back to the very first video, duration and sessionization, I'll walk you through how this code works. We're basically going to change it to an hour, and now we have sessions that are an hour long, and we did a match split, so we've created new sequences for each of those sessions. So this user, for example, you can see they have 11 sessions. Now that we have our sessions, we want to look at the time gap just between sessions and not between every event. We've got the data on there, so now we just need to create a dimension on the sequence with that data. So I'm going to say I'm going to create a new value called time gap, and I'm going to set that to that time gap in the very last value in the session. And so the very last value, I can say -1, and I'm going to use that time to next event, that time to next event thing that we calculated. So now on every session, I have 2.6 days, 5.46 days, 2.74 days, 1.79 days. So basically, I calculated this time to next event on every event, but then once I sessionized the data, I only used the one that was on the last value in the session, and I pulled that forward onto our session as a dimension, so we can see it here. Great, so now we want to plot this, but actually as I look at the data, take for example this user who came only one time, there was only one session and never came back, and their time gap is null. So I want to think about what to do with that time gap. So just keep that in mind for now. We're going to go ahead and plot, and then we'll come back to that. So I'm going to hit plot, And then I want to plot our time gap along the x-axis. So that's going to give me all the different time gap values. I'm going to bin this by day just to make it really easy to understand. And so now I'm going to get the number of sessions in each of these bins. And I see this kind of bimodal distribution where there's, a peak here and a peak here. And then this is going to be new. We're going to use the group by feature to show our different segments. So I'm going to group by segment. And now I can see our casual users and our binge users here. I'm using count still. Just to make this comparison a little easier, I'm going to normalize those counts by percentage of all. And this is where the null values come up again. So I can do percentage of all without the null values. So I'll just look at people that have a value, or percentage of all, in our case sessions, that include the null values. So I'm going to start with that, including the null values, because I want that to be in the denominator. Okay, so now we've got some pretty comparable groups here. We can see for our casual users, there's a pronounced peak around this 2 to 3 and 3 to 4 days. So they're returning, on average every 2 or 3 days. But for our binge users, we see that shifted out, and they're on average 7 to 8, 6 to 7 days. And then they have a way more pronounced kind of secondary peak out here at 14 days. So if you're, and what's exciting here is that the first math that we did to get to the segment was related to the experience in the session. And then this analysis is across sessions. So this is really kind of a distinct insight that we're seeing, that the people that have this within session characteristic have this across session kind of insight that we see here. I want to go back really quick to the nulls. They could be really important, so I don't want to leave them out. So we have a function called coalesce. This is common in SQL that just takes those null values, and we can assign whatever we want to them. In our case, I'm going to put them out here at 21 days. And now remember, because we're in a view, I have to hit run query. And then this will just give those null values a value of 21 days. Now we see them appear out here. And for our binge users in blue, the peak is much greater as a percentage of all users than the peak in orange. And so that means the pattern is consistent here. If we had seen that orange peak be very large, that would have been alarming, that maybe even though our casual users have this frequent behavior, they will disappear and never come back at a higher rate. But we're seeing that they have this, they don't come back at a lower rate compared to the binge users. Okay, so we started with our segments from behavioral segmentation. We calculated a per event value based on an array. That was very exciting, very different. And we did sessionization, which we're used to, and then we took our per event value and assigned it to our sequence at the session level, and then we plotted that to understand the difference between our two segments. I hope that helps.